The HOA thought they could let people park in my private warehouse without asking, so I had every single car towed. The first time Marcus Reynolds noticed an unfamiliar car parked in his warehouse lot, he didn't think much of it. A simple mistake, he reasoned, easily corrected with a polite note tucked under the windshield wiper. But when he arrived at his property the following morning to find not one but 3 vehicles occupying spaces that were legally and exclusively his, Marcus felt the first prickle of what would eventually become a towering rage. Marcus had purchased the warehouse 5 years ago as an investment property, a decision that had required significant financial sacrifice and meticulous planning. Located on the edge of Oak Ridge Estates, an affluent suburb with manicured lawns and restrictive covenants, the warehouse sat just beyond the formal boundaries of the Homeowners Association, but close enough to benefit from the neighborhood's low crime rate and well-maintained roads. It was the perfect location for his business, storing vintage motorcycles and classic cars for collectors, secure, accessible, yet discreet. What Marcus hadn't anticipated was the property becoming a target for opportunistic parking by residents of the adjacent luxury condominium complex that had been completed just 6 months earlier. "Excuse me," he called out to a woman in designer athleisure wear who was retrieving something from the trunk of her Mercedes, one of the unauthorized vehicles. "This is private property. You can't park here." The woman barely glanced up. "The HOA said we could use these spaces temporarily while they're expanding our parking garage." She slammed her trunk shut and walked away, designer handbag swinging with each confident stride. Marcus stood there, momentarily stunned. No one had consulted him about any such arrangement. No one had asked his permission or offered compensation. As the legal owner of the property, he was certain he would have remembered agreeing to transform his business parking into a makeshift lot for luxury condo residents. That afternoon, Marcus placed his first call to the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. After navigating a labyrinth of automated menu options, he finally reached Deborah Winters, the association's president. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Reynolds," she said in a tone that suggested she understood nothing of the sort. "But with the construction of the new wing of the condominium parking facility, we had to make temporary accommodations. Your lot seemed the logical solution given its proximity and underutilization." "Underutilization?" Marcus repeated, his grip tightening on the phone. "It's a private business property that I pay taxes on. Whether I park 1 vehicle or 100 is irrelevant. You've had no right to tell residents they could park there." "Well," Deborah's voice took on a frosty edge, "as I understand it, your property benefits substantially from its association with Oak Ridge Estates, despite not being an official part of our community. Perhaps a spirit of neighborly cooperation would be appropriate." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Deborah suggesting that if Marcus were to make difficulties, the HOA might need to reconsider certain access privileges his clients currently enjoyed when visiting his warehouse. That night, Marcus could barely sleep. The audacity of the HOA's actions, directing residents to use his private property without permission, then implying he should be grateful for the dubious privilege of proximity to their precious community, left him seething. As a business owner and taxpayer, he'd always played by the rules. He'd secured permits, paid fees, and respected boundaries. He expected others to do the same. By morning, when he arrived to find 7 vehicles now parked in his lot, including a gleaming Range Rover taking up the space directly in front of his main entrance, Marcus knew that polite notes and phone calls weren't going to resolve the situation. The HOA had made a critical error in judgment, mistaking his professionalism for weakness, his patience for acquiescence. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd never had reason to call before: Absolute Towing and Recovery. It was time to send a message that even the entitled residents of Oak Ridge Estates couldn't ignore. The representative from Absolute Towing and Recovery arrived at Marcus's warehouse exactly 45 minutes after his call. Jim Harkins was a burly man with 20 years in the towing business and the weary expression of someone who had seen every parking dispute imaginable. "So let me get this straight," Jim said, surveying the collection of luxury vehicles scattered across Marcus's lot. "The HOA next door just told people they could park here? On your private property? Without even asking you?" Marcus nodded grimly. "That's exactly what happened. And when I called to complain, they basically threatened me with access issues for my clients if I didn't play along." Jim let out a low whistle. "I've dealt with some power-tripping HOAs in my time, but this takes the cake." He pulled a clipboard from his truck. "You've got all your documentation? Proof of ownership, property boundaries, that sort of thing?" Marcus produced a folder containing his property deed, business license, and tax records. Jim examined them carefully, nodding as he confirmed the legitimacy of Marcus's claim. "Look," Jim said, "I can absolutely tow these vehicles. You're well within your rights, but I want you to understand what you're getting into. These people," he gestured toward the upscale condominiums visible just beyond the property line, "they're going to raise hell. They'll call the police, they'll threaten lawsuits, They'll make all kinds of noise. Marcus took a deep breath. I understand. But I tried the reasonable approach. I left notes I called the HOA. I even tried talking directly to some of the car owners. They just don't care. This is my livelihood, Jim. I can't have random people blocking access to my warehouse. What happens when one of my high-end clients can't get their vintage Ferrari in or out because some condo owner is parked in the way? Jim handed Marcus a stack of signs. First things first, you need to post these no parking, private property, violators will be towed signs immediately. Take photos of them once they're up. Then we'll need to take photos of each vehicle before we tow it, documenting its position on your property. For the next hour, Marcus and Jim methodically prepared the site, placing signs at every entrance and along the perimeter. Marcus sent certified letters to both the HOA office and the condominium management company, formally notifying them that unauthorized vehicles would be towed at the owner's expense effective immediately. He made copies of everything, creating a meticulous paper trail that would withstand scrutiny. We'll come by tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., Jim said before leaving. Might want to be here early yourself. It's not going to be pretty. That evening, Marcus received a voicemail from Deborah Winters. Her previously condescending tone had sharpened into barely contained fury. Mr. Reynolds, I've received your communication regarding towing. I strongly advise you to reconsider this aggressive and unnecessary action. The board will be discussing your property at our emergency meeting tonight. I suggest you attend if you value your business's standing in this community. Marcus deleted the message without responding. He'd given the HOA ample opportunity to address the situation reasonably. Now they would learn that their self-appointed authority stopped at his property line. At 5:30 the next morning, Marcus arrived at his warehouse to find 11 vehicles parked throughout his lot, more than ever before. It seemed the condo residents had either ignored or removed his newly posted signs. As he waited for Jim's tow trucks to arrive, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. A silver-haired man in an expensive jogging suit was approaching, his face set in an expression of practiced authority. Marcus recognized him immediately as Richard Kensington, a local real estate developer and prominent HOA board member. Reynolds, Kensington called out, not bothering with pleasantries. What's with all these towing signs? Deborah tried to contact you last night. Marcus turned to face him directly. Those signs mean exactly what they say. This is private property and unauthorized vehicles will be towed. Kensington's expression darkened. Look, we can work something out here. Maybe a monthly fee for use of the spaces. The garage expansion will only take another month or two. So now you want to negotiate? Marcus asked incredulously. After you've already been using my property without permission for weeks? After your HOA president threatened me? Before Kensington could respond, the rumble of diesel engines announced the arrival of 3 absolute towing trucks turning into the lot. Jim Harkins stepped out of the lead vehicle, clipboard in hand, followed by his team of drivers. Morning, Mr. Reynolds, Jim called out cheerfully. Ready to reclaim your property? Within 30 minutes of the first tow truck's arrival, Marcus's warehouse lot transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. The absolute towing team worked with practiced efficiency, hooking up vehicles and documenting every step with photos and detailed notes. Jim Harkins had brought enough trucks and operators to handle multiple cars simultaneously, a decision that proved prescient as residents began to emerge from the nearby condominiums, alerted by Kensington's frantic calls. That's my car, a woman in silk pajamas and a designer bathrobe shrieked as she watched her white Lexus being hoisted onto a flatbed. You can't do this. I live right there. She pointed wildly toward the condominiums. Ma'am, Jim replied with the calm demeanor of someone who had weathered countless such confrontations, this is private property. There are clearly posted signs indicating no unauthorized parking. Your vehicle is being towed to our secure lot at 1470 Industrial Parkway. The release fee is $275, plus $50 per day storage. The woman's face contorted with rage. Do you have any idea who my husband is? He's on the city council. Then he should be familiar with private property laws, Marcus interjected, and trespassing ordinances. By 7:15 a.m., a small crowd had gathered at the edge of the property. Some residents were filming with their phones, others were on calls with spouses or the HOA office, and a few were openly threatening legal action. 2 police cruisers pulled into the lot, responding to multiple calls about vehicle theft. Officer Ramirez, a veteran of the local force, assessed the situation with a practiced eye. He reviewed Marcus' documentation, inspected the newly posted signs, and spoke briefly with Jim about the towing procedures being followed. Looks like everything's in order here, Officer Ramirez finally announced to the gathered residents. This is private property, folks. The owner has the right to have unauthorized vehicles removed. But the aHOA told us we could park here, someone shouted from the crowd. Officer Ramirez shrugged. Then you need to take that up with your aHOA. They can't give permission to use someone. The retribution began subtly. 3 days after the mass towing, Marcus noticed a county inspection vehicle parked outside his warehouse. A stern-faced woman with a clipboard methodically examined every aspect of his property, from the electrical panels to the fire suppression system. She found 4 potential violations that had somehow never been issued during previous inspections. Strange timing, Catherine Zhao remarked when Marcus called to update her. Have you checked if any of your clients have had trouble accessing your property? Marcus hadn't thought to ask, but a quick series of calls confirmed Catherine's suspicions. 3 clients reported being stopped by newly installed security personnel at the entrance to Oak Ridge Estates, who claimed the route they'd always used to access Marcus's warehouse was now restricted to residents and authorized guests only. The next morning, Marcus arrived to find construction crews setting up at the intersection connecting his property to the main road. A worker in a hard hat approached with a clipboard. Just giving you a courtesy notice, the man said. This road's going to be closed for repairs for the next 2 weeks. You'll need to use the alternate route. He pointed to a crude map showing a detour that would add 15 minutes to any journey to or from the warehouse. When Marcus called the County Public Works Department, he was informed that the road work was emergency maintenance requested by the Oak Ridge Estates HOA, who had reported dangerous conditions affecting resident safety. This is getting ridiculous, Marcus told Catherine during their emergency meeting that afternoon. They're systematically trying to choke off my business. Catherine spread a collection of documents across her desk. It's not just that. Look at these. She pushed forward a stack of formal complaints filed with various local agencies, noise complaints, allegations of commercial vehicles causing road damage, even an environmental concern about potential contamination from classic cars stored on the property. All filed within the last 48 hours, she noted, all requiring formal responses and inspections. They're burying me in bureaucracy, Marcus realized. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. Exactly. And there's more. Catherine pulled up an email on her tablet. The HOA has filed for an emergency zoning review of your property, claiming that your business operation is not consistent with the area's residential character. But my warehouse was here before those condos were even built. Which is why they won't ultimately win, Catherine assured him. But they can certainly make your life difficult in the meantime. These are people with connections and influence. That became abundantly clear the following day when Marcus picked up the local newspaper to find a front-page article about business-residential conflicts featuring prominently a photo of his warehouse with the tow trucks from days earlier. The article quoted several concerned residents about the aggressive business practices threatening their peaceful community. Judge Eleanor Prescott was quoted discussing the general legal principles of good faith dealings between neighbors, without explicitly mentioning Marcus' property. Richard Kensington offered his expertise on the importance of compatible land use in maintaining property values. Not a single word from Marcus appeared in the article, despite his hour-long interview with the reporter. When he called the newspaper to complain about the one-sided coverage, the editor sounded genuinely apologetic. Look, I hear you, but the publisher is golfing buddies with half the HOA board. My hands were tied on this one. By the end of the week, Marcus's business had slowed to a crawl. Clients called to cancel appointments, citing the road closure and difficulties with access. 2 local banks that had been discussing financing options for his planned expansion suddenly went silent. Even his insurance agent called with concerns about his coverage given the increased regulatory scrutiny of his business. Marcus found himself spending more time responding to inspections and paperwork than actually running his business. Each morning brought new obstacles, an unannounced health department inspection, a fire marshal suddenly concerned about his storage methods, even parking enforcement officers ticketing his own service vehicles when they were parked on the street during a client pickup. They're trying to break me, Marcus told June Harkins when they met for coffee at a diner far from Oak Ridge Estates, away from prying eyes. Make me regret standing up to them. Jim nodded grimly. HOAs can be vindictive when challenged, but you'd be surprised how often they overplay their hand. What do you mean? Marcus's video hit the internet like a perfectly aimed lightning bolt. Within hours, #LOverreach was trending locally. By the next morning, his methodical presentation of evidence, complete with time-stamped emails, recorded phone calls from a one-party consent state, and testimony from intimidated county inspectors who had chosen to speak anonymously, had been shared thousands of times. Local TV stations descended on Oak Ridge Estates, cameras capturing the now infamous parking lot where it all began. Reporters pressed microphones toward tight-lipped aHOA board members hurrying to their luxury vehicles. National news outlets picked up the story under headlines like David versus Goliath, Small Business Owner Exposes aHOA Corruption, and The Dark Side of Homeowners Associations, When Power Goes Unchecked. The turning point came on day 3 when a popular consumer rights advocate with millions of followers shared Marcus's story, adding that this is happening everywhere. aHOAs have become shadow governments with zero accountability. The post included a link to Marcus's original video and a call for others to share similar experiences. They did, by the hundreds. Stories poured in from across the country, tales of arbitrary fines, selective enforcement, personal vendettas carried out through bylaws, and board members using their positions for personal gain. Marcus's warehouse became a symbol for a much larger issue that had been simmering beneath the surface of suburban America. Mr. Reynolds, how do you respond to the aHOA's statement that this was all a misunderstanding? A reporter asked Marcus as he stood outside his warehouse, where business had mysteriously returned to normal after the road construction crews disappeared overnight. I'd say the documents speak for themselves, Marcus replied calmly. There's no misunderstanding when you deliberately direct people to use private property without permission, then systematically target business owner for standing up for their rights. Inside the Oak Ridge Estates community, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Residents who had previously remained silent began questioning their board's actions. Many were horrified to learn how their HOA fees had been used to wage a personal vendetta against a neighboring business. Others were simply embarrassed to be associated with what social media had dubbed the most entitled HOA in America. The emergency board meeting called to address the PR crisis was standing room only. Residents who had never attended a meeting in their lives packed the community center, demanding explanations. "This is absurd," Deborah Winters insisted, her usual composure cracking under pressure. The board was simply trying to protect community interests and property values. By breaking the law, called out a resident from the back. By harassing a legitimate business owner. "We did not authorize harassment," Richard Kensington interjected. "Certain inquiries were made through proper channels." "You mean you called your buddies to send inspectors after him?" Another resident interrupted. "We've all seen the evidence. The emails where you specifically asked the county commissioner to find something, anything, to cite him for." The meeting devolved from there, with board members attempting to defend actions that looked increasingly indefensible in the harsh light of public scrutiny. By the end of the evening, a motion had passed to hold a special election for all board positions within 30 days. The following morning, Marcus received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Alan Parker. I'm an attorney representing several residents of Oak Ridge Estates." The voice was crisp, professional, but noticeably lacking the condescension Marcus had come to expect from the aHOA representatives. "My clients would like to discuss a formal resolution to this unfortunate situation." 2 days later, Marcus sat across from a delegation of Oak Ridge Estates residents, none of whom were current board members, in Catherine Zhao's conference room. The atmosphere was tense but civil. First and foremost began a silver-haired woman who introduced herself as Dr. Helen Martinez. "We want to apologize for what you've been subjected to. Many of us had no idea what was being done in our name. We're proposing a formal settlement," Alan Parker explained, sliding a document across the table. "Full reimbursement for all expenses incurred due to the aHOA's actions, including legal fees, lost business, and damages to your reputation. Additionally, we're prepared to offer compensation for the inappropriate use of your property." Catherine reviewed the numbers with a raised eyebrow. The figure was substantial, far more than Marcus had expected. "There's one more thing," Dr. Martinez added. "The residents have formed a reform